Jack's shuttle broke through the clouds with fire trailing behind it. Sparks flew as the metal shell slammed into the rocky jungle below. Alarms screamed, lights flashed red, and the crash left a smoking trail through the dense alien trees. Inside, Jack groaned, blood dripping from a cut on his forehead. He unbuckled himself and crawled out of the wreckage, coughing hard. His mission was simple: deliver supplies to an outpost. Now he was stranded on an unknown moon. Alone, the air was thick and humid, filled with strange insect sounds and rustling leaves. Jack grabbed a survival pack and stumbled forward. He needed shelter before nightfall as he pushed through thick vines. He heard a noise, not an animal growl, not the wind, but something softer, a cry. Jack stopped and listened, his training kicking in. He followed the sound until he saw her. An alien girl lay near a stream, her leg caught in a steel trap. She looked young, maybe in her early 20s by human comparison. Her skin was pale blue, with glowing silver patterns like tattoos on her arms. She was bleeding, weak, and terrified. Jack slowly raised his hands, showing he meant no harm. The girl whimpered something in her language, her eyes full of pain. Jack moved closer and knelt beside her. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'll help you." She didn't understand the words, but she saw the kindness in his eyes. With a deep breath, Jack pulled out a tool and unlocked the trap. She screamed as the metal snapped open. Jack quickly tore some cloth from his uniform and wrapped her leg. He lifted her into his arms as gently as he could. The sun was going down fast. Suddenly, a low growl echoed from the trees. 3 beasts stepped out, long bodies, sharp teeth, glowing red eyes. They looked like wolves, but moved like snakes. Jack backed away, holding the girl tightly. He spotted a large tree with twisted roots nearby and ran. He ducked into the hollow space beneath it, setting the girl down behind him. She clutched his arm, her breathing fast and shallow. The creatures surrounded them, circling slowly. Jack grabbed a metal rod from his belt, his only weapon. The first beast lunged, and Jack swung hard, hitting its jaw. The second came from the side, claws out. Jack kicked it back and turned just in time to dodge the third. The girl screamed his name, not his real name, but something close: Jacker. It gave him strength. With a final shout, Jack slammed the rod into the last creature's eye. It shrieked and collapsed, the others running into the dark. Jack fell to his knees, panting hard. Blood dripped from his arm where claws had ripped his suit. The alien girl touched his face gently, her eyes shining with tears. She whispered something, then passed out in his lap. Jack held her close, feeling the weight of the moment. The next morning, light broke through the trees. Jack carried her through the forest, searching for help. He spotted smoke rising in the distance and moved toward it. Soon, he reached a hidden village made of stone huts and high walls. Alien warriors with spears rushed forward. Surrounding him, he held the girl out and shouted, "She's hurt." "I helped her." One of the elders stepped forward and looked at the girl's leg. The elder nodded slowly, then raised his hand. Jack was led inside while others took the girl gently. He sat by a fire, exhausted and confused. An older woman approached and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You saved her," she said in broken English. "Now you must complete the rite." Jack blinked. "What rite?" The woman pointed toward a large tent where the girl was being taken. "You took her pain, now you must take her purity," she said softly. Jack stood up, heart pounding. "Wait, what are you talking about?" The elder woman didn't answer, only bowed and left. Jack turned and saw the girl looking at him from the tent's entrance. She was cleaned, dressed in white, her silver markings glowing bright. She said nothing, but her eyes were not afraid. They were waiting. Jack stood, frozen. As the whole village watched, he had saved her from death, and now their law said she belonged to him. But this wasn't Earth. And this wasn't love. This was tradition. He stepped toward the tent slowly, unsure of everything. Inside, the girl reached out her hand toward him, her fingers trembling. Jack took a deep breath, knowing that nothing after this would ever be the same. The fire cracked beside Jack as he sat in silence, his hands shaking slightly. The tribal drums had stopped, but their meaning echoed in his mind. Around him, the alien villagers whispered in their own tongue, watching the outsider who had unknowingly crossed into their most sacred law. He hadn't come here to be a hero or a mate. He just wanted to survive. Now everything was different. Zara stood just inside the ceremonial tent, her silver patterns glowing softly under the flickering light. Her eyes were not full of fear. They were steady, calm, even curious. Jack didn't know what to do. He looked at her, then at the elder, who waited outside with a quiet, patient expression. This wasn't some twisted trap, it was their belief, their tradition. To them, this was sacred. And Jack had stepped into it without warning. A soft breeze carried the scent of flowers and herbs through the air. The tent was warm, filled with faint smoke and glowing stones that pulsed with soft light. Jack stepped closer, his boots brushing the soft animal hides beneath him. Zara sat down slowly on a cushion, her hands resting on her lap. She didn't speak his language, but her eyes asked a question, not of duty, but of trust. Jack sat across from her, rubbing his hands together nervously. "I didn't mean for this," he whispered. "I just wanted to help." She tilted her head, not understanding the words. But sensing the weight behind them, she reached out and touched his hand. Her fingers were cool and smooth. Jack looked down at their hands, surprised at how small hers felt in his. Outside, the elders waited for the flames to die. That was the rule when the fire ended. The decision must be made. Inside, Jack and Zara stared at each other, not like strangers anymore, but like two people trapped by something older than either of them. Jack leaned forward, speaking slowly. "You don't have to do this," he said. "Not because they told you to." Zara blinked, then slowly moved her hand to her own chest. She said a word softly when Jack didn't understand, but her voice trembled a little, and her eyes watered. Then she touched his chest gently and said the same word again, her tone stronger. Jack didn't know what she meant, but somehow it felt like a choice, not a command. He nodded slowly. "Okay," he said quietly, then. "We do this your way." She smiled, just a little, then stood up and moved toward the glowing basin of warm water in the corner. She dipped her hands and sprinkled a few drops on her arms, then offered the same to him. It wasn't a ceremony anymore. It was something smaller, quieter, more human. When they finished the small gesture, Zara sat close beside him, their shoulders touching. No words were spoken, but the silence was peaceful, not heavy, not forced. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and Jack didn't move. He let her stay there, listening to her breathing, steady and calm. The fire outside finally turned to smoke. The elder outside stepped away from the tent, not needing to ask what happened. In their eyes, the bond had been made. The human had accepted the girl, and she had accepted him, but inside, it wasn't about rules anymore. It was something different, something born out of survival, kindness, and shared breath. In a quiet room, Jack didn't sleep that night, not really. Zara curled up beside him on the soft bedding, her arm over his chest, her breathing slow and peaceful. He stared at the roof of the tent, thinking about how everything had changed in just one day. He saved someone, and now he belonged to a tribe, to a girl, to a tradition he didn't ask for. But strangely, he didn't feel trapped. He felt seen. Zara wasn't a prisoner of her people. She chose him. And that choice meant more than any tradition ever could. As the sky began to turn blue, and strange alien birds began to sing, Jack finally closed his eyes, knowing the real battle was not the one in the ravine. It was the one happening now, between the old ways and what came next. And Zira, with her quiet strength and glowing silver skin, was not just a girl he saved. She was the reason he was still alive, and perhaps the reason he would stay. The village awoke slowly under the pale purple sky. Villagers moved quietly, whispering among themselves as they passed the ceremonial tent. No one disturbed it, not out of fear but respect. Inside, Jack sat upright, his back against the wooden wall. Zara still rested beside him, curled in soft blankets, her breathing calm and even. For the first time in hours, the world felt still. Jack hadn't touched her in the way their law expected. He'd touched her heart instead, without knowing how. He had offered her a new path, and she had walked it with him, not because of duty, but because of choice, and that meant something powerful. More than Jack could yet understand. The flap of the tent moved, and a young boy entered, bowing respectfully before handing Jack a set of tribal clothes. Simple but finely woven, the colors matched Zara's silver marks. The boy pointed outside, then left. Jack stood, quietly changing into the new outfit. The material was soft and light, and strangely comforting. Zara opened her eyes slowly and watched him. She didn't speak, just smiled gently, as if proud of him. Then she sat up, fixing her dress with graceful hands. She dipped her fingers in a small bowl of green paint and gently touched Jack's forehead, a single line, then a second crossing it, forming a symbol, a mark of acceptance outside. Drums began again, but this time they weren't loud or urgent. They were steady, warm, like a heartbeat. Zara took his hand and led him outside. The village had gathered in a wide circle. Children sat at the front, warriors stood behind, and elders formed a line in the center. The air was filled with expectation. Jack stepped into the center of the circle, Zara beside him, the elder woman. From before, stepped forward and raised her hand. Silence followed. She spoke slowly in her language, her words full of weight and history. Jack didn't understand the details, but he felt them, felt the pressure of hundreds of eyes, of centuries of custom pressing down on him. Then the elder stepped aside, and an older man stepped forward, holding a small wooden blade, not sharp, not deadly ceremonial. He extended it toward Jack and pointed to Zara. Then to the ground. Jack hesitated, not knowing what was expected. Zara leaned closer and whispered a single word. Symbol. Jack knelt, and with the wooden blade, carved a shallow line in the dirt. Then another crossing it, the same mark. On his forehead, the villagers gasped softly, a wave of murmurs passing through them. Zara smiled and knelt beside him, placing her hand over the symbol, her fingers pressing into the earth. The old man nodded, satisfied, and lifted the blade toward the sky. The crowd cheered, not loud and wild, but soft and proud, as if a great peace had been made, not just between Jack and Zara, but between human and alien, outsider and tribe. After the ceremony, food was shared. Under the trees, fruits that glowed faintly, warm bread, and strange but sweet drinks. Jack sat beside Zara, trying everything, laughing for the first time since the crash. The villagers relaxed too. Children came to sit by him, pointing at his hair, his eyes giggling when he made funny faces. But not everyone was pleased. From the edge of the crowd, a tall warrior stood watching, his face tight with anger. His arms crossed over his chest. He had deep scars across his shoulders, and his eyes followed Zara wherever she moved. Jack noticed him and leaned toward one of the friendly villagers. "Who's that?" he asked. The villager's smile faded. "That is Varen," he said quietly. He once wished for Zara to choose him. Jack glanced back at the man, and their eyes met, cold, sharp, like a blade in shadow. Something told Jack that peace was not going to last forever. Later that evening, As the stars rose and fires dimmed, Zara and Jack walked by the river outside the village. The sky reflected in the water like a dream. She pointed at constellations and told him their names in her language. He repeated them clumsily, making her laugh. It was gentle, easy. The way new love sometimes is, but even then, Jack felt the wind change. A chill brushing through the trees, something coming, something that tradition alone could not stop. Behind them, in the darkness of the trees, Varen sharpened his blade against a rock, not a ceremonial one. This was made for real blood. And his eyes burned with jealousy that tradition could not calm. The fire of the tribe might have accepted Jack, but some flames burned deeper than law, and Jack had no idea that his fight to save Zara's life was only the beginning. Asterisk night had fallen over the jungle village, and most fires had dimmed to soft embers. Gentle winds moved through the trees, carrying the scents of warm fruit and glowing moss. Jack and Zara sat quietly on a stone bench near the edge of the river. Her head rested lightly on his shoulder. The stars above them shimmered like scattered gems. Peaceful, beautiful, silent, but the silence didn't last. A loud horn blasted through the air, deep and sharp. Like a warning from the bones of the world, Jack stood up quickly, looking around. Villagers rushed from their homes with weapons in hand. Zara's eyes widened in fear. She grabbed his arm tightly, whispering one word. Varen? From the far side of the village, torches lit up the trees as a group of warriors entered. Not all were from the tribe. Some had darker armor, scarred skin, and red face markings. They moved with aggression, not ceremony. At the front was Varen, his chest bare and painted in black lines. A curved blade in his hand, and rage in his eyes, the elders stepped forward to block his path. But Varen raised his hand. "Step aside," he shouted. "This is no longer a matter of tradition." Jack walked forward slowly, unsure of what was happening. Zara stood beside him, her hand trembling in his. Varen looked straight at Jack, his voice full of fury. "You don't belong here, human. You stole what was promised to me." Jack took a step forward, confused. "She's not a prize." He said, "She chose." The crowd murmured, shocked that a human dared speak those words so clearly. Varen's lips curled into a sneer. "Then prove your worth, not through fire and symbols, but through combat." The elders tried to stop him, saying the union had already been accepted, the rites completed, but Varen refused to listen. "If the human is strong, he'll survive," he growled. "If not, he dies and the old ways return." Zara stepped forward and shouted in her native tongue. Tears in her voice, her words were filled with fire and pain. She was not asking them to stop, she was demanding it. But Varen pointed his blade at her. "You've been blinded by his lies," he snarled. "You were mine by destiny." Jack could feel the tension rising, and he knew there was no way out of this. The tribe was watching, caught between the past and the future. And right now, the future looked like him. Jack nodded slowly and stepped forward. "I'll fight," he said, "but not to claim anyone. I fight to protect her choice." The villagers stepped back. Forming a wide circle in the center of the village, torches were lit again, casting long shadows across the dirt. Varen entered the circle, spinning his blade with deadly ease. Jack entered too, with only a wooden training staff offered by one of the elders. Zara stood at the edge of the ring, her hands shaking, her lips pressed tight, her heart pounding in her chest. She had seen Varen fight before, fast, cruel, merciless. Jack had no idea what was coming. The drums began, slow and deep, a sound older than words. The duel had started. Varen lunged first, fast like a predator, his blade flashing in the torchlight. Jack dodged and blocked, barely holding ground. He had fought before on other planets, in other battles, but this was different. This was personal. The staff cracked under the first blow. Jack stumbled, his shoulder bruised. Varen laughed cruelly, circling him. "You're weak, outsider." He growled. "You only survived because of pity." Jack didn't answer. He focused, breathing steady. Remembering his training, remembering her eyes, her trust, her voice calling his name, Varen struck again, aiming for Jack's chest, but Jack spun, letting the strike graze past. Then jabbed the staff into Varen's side. The warrior grunted and stepped back. Surprised, the crowd gasped. A human had landed a blow. But it wasn't over. Varen charged again. Furious, blade swinging wide, Jack ducked, then slammed the end of the staff into Varen's knee. The warrior stumbled, but didn't fall. He roared and slashed, cutting across Jack's side. Blood splashed on the dirt. Zira screamed his name, "Jackar!" Jack fell to one knee, pain burning through him. But he didn't stop. He gritted his teeth and stood up, using his injured side as bait when Varen came in for the final strike. Jack dropped low and swept his legs. Varen crashed to the ground, and Jack pinned him with the broken staff at his throat. The crowd froze. No one moved. Jack looked at the elders, then at Zara. "End this," he said. Breathing hard, "I don't need his blood." The elders stepped forward and raised their hands. The drum stopped. The fight was over. Jack dropped the staff and turned to Zara, his side bleeding, his legs shaking. She ran to him and wrapped her arms around him, her tears hot against his chest. She didn't care about the tribe or the law, only that he was alive, and for the first time the tribe truly saw him not just as a foreigner, not just as her protector, but as one of them. Even Varen, lying bruised in the dust, could not deny the truth anymore. The outsider had earned his place, not with tradition, but with way, courage, and with that, everything changed. The jungle was quiet again, but the silence was different now. It was the kind that came after a storm, not peaceful, but waiting. Torches flickered low as villagers slowly returned to their homes, speaking in hushed voices, the dust of the battle. Still floating in the air, Jack leaned against a stone pillar, his side bandaged, his shirt stained red. Zara sat beside him, gently placing cold leaves against his wounds, her hands soft but firm. Neither of them spoke for a long time. There was too much to say, and yet nothing that needed words. The bond between them had changed. It was no longer born of tradition or ceremony. It was made from fire, from choices, and from pain shared. Zara looked up at him with wet eyes. She pressed her forehead to his chest and whispered something in her language, something full of meaning. Jack didn't understand the words, but he understood the weight behind them, and when he placed a hand over hers, she smiled, small and real. The fire beside them crackled gently, casting shadows on the walls of the elder's tent. A place Jack had never expected to be again. The tribal leaders had invited him in, not to command him, but to offer him a voice, an equal's voice. The human had bled for one of theirs, and that mattered more than his species, one of the elders. Gray-skinned woman with ancient eyes leaned forward and spoke slowly in broken English. "You have taken her pain," she said. "Now, you take her future." Jack looked confused, unsure what she meant. Zira turned to him, her fingers brushing his hand. She pointed to herself, then to him, then placed her palm over her heart. Slowly, her voice soft, she said, "No more tradition, Jack." Blinked, surprised, Zara took a deep breath, then faced the elders, her voice rising, speaking firmly in her own language. She stood tall, shoulders back, declaring something that made the room fall silent. Even the oldest warriors lowered their heads. She was giving up her birthright, the right to follow the ancient custom that had ruled her people for generations, and instead She was choosing her own path with him, not because he saved her, not because law said so, but because she wanted it, wanted him. Jack stood slowly. Realizing what was happening, he turned to the elders and nodded. "We do this our way," he said, "together." The old woman smiled, wrinkles deepening, and whispered something Jack didn't catch, but Zara did. She turned to him and whispered in English, careful and slow, "Tonight, no law, no eyes. Only us." Later, under the soft blue glow of alien moonlight, they returned to Zara's tent. It was quiet, filled with soft, woven blankets, small, glowing stones, and dried flowers that released a gentle scent. Jack sat down slowly, his body aching but heart calm. Zara joined him, sitting close, her fingers resting gently on his knee. She looked into his eyes and spoke again. Slowly, "I was afraid. First," she said, "but not of you. Afraid of not being enough." Jack shook his head. "You were never not enough," he whispered. "You're more than I ever imagined." She smiled, leaned forward, and kissed him. Slow, soft, not rushed, not forced. It was not the kiss of tradition. Was hers, hers to give, hers to offer freely. Jack kissed her back, his hand gently resting on her back, and in that quiet moment, their bond deepened. Not in front of a crowd, not under law, but between two hearts in the still of night. They lay together in the soft glow, wrapped in warmth and quiet breath. Her head resting on his chest, fingers tangled in his shirt. Jack stared at the glowing patterns above them. A mural of stars painted across the fabric of the tent. Outside, the wind rustled the trees, and distant voices faded into silence. Inside, there was no fear, no ceremony, no judgment, only warmth, safety, and the beginning of something new, something fragile and beautiful. A girl who chose to love, and a man who chose to stay, and neither of them felt like they owed anyone anything anymore. Only each other. The next morning, light spilled through the gaps in the tent walls like soft gold. Zara woke first, her hand still resting against Jack's chest. His breathing was deep and steady, his face calm in sleep. She stared at him for a long time, her fingers lightly brushing the scars on his arm. He was not like the others, not her people, not the warriors she had grown up around. He had no sharp claws, no armor skin, no ancient bloodline to boast of. And yet, he was stronger than all of them. She stood quietly, walking to the small wash basin in the corner. She dipped her hands into the cool water. The touch woke her fully. And with it came the thought, what would happen now? The ceremony was over, the bond was made, but it wasn't about laws anymore. It was about what they built next. Jack opened his eyes slowly, blinking at the morning light, then smiled faintly when he saw her. "You're already up," he said, his voice rough from sleep. She nodded and walked back to him, offering him a piece of fruit. He bit into it gratefully, the juice running down his chin. Zara laughed quietly and wiped it with her sleeve. The small moment felt more intimate than any kiss. A knock came at the tent flap. A young girl entered with a message. Her face looked serious. She bowed and spoke in Zara's language quickly. Zara's smile vanished. She turned to Jack and whispered, "Council. They want us." Now they dressed in silence and made their way to the center of the village, where the council waited under the large stone canopy. The crowd was larger than before, many more eyes watching. Even strangers from other tribes had arrived. Word of the humans' fight and the broken tradition had spread like fire. Not everyone was happy about it. One of the elders, the same woman with gray eyes and twisted jewelry, stepped forward. She spoke calmly but firmly, her words translated by another standing nearby. "Your bond has shaken the roots of the old ways." The translator said, "Some say it is a sign of evolution. Others call it a mistake. Zara didn't flinch. We chose each other. She replied in her own tongue, not because of rules, not because of blood, because of choice. Murmurs rose in the crowd, some in support, others in disapproval. Jack stepped forward and raised his hand. He wasn't good with speeches, but his voice was steady. "I didn't come here to change your world," he said, "but if loving her is a threat to your law, maybe your law needs to be looked at." That silence was louder than anything else so far. The elder turned and spoke quietly with others beside her. After a long moment, she turned back and said, "The law stands." "But so does the exception," Jack frowned. Not sure what that meant, the translator explained. "You will not be punished, but you are now both outside the law, beyond it, no longer bound by its protections or its privileges." Zara stood still, her face unreadable, but her fingers curled into fists at her sides. Jack reached out and held her hand gently. "So we're alone," he said softly, "together." The elder gave them a final nod, and the crowd began to break apart slowly. Some walked away in anger, others in quiet thought, but no one dared challenge them again. That night, the village was silent. No feasts, no drums, just flickering fires and whispering winds. Zara sat on the rooftop of their tent, legs crossed, eyes watching the stars. Jack climbed up beside her, careful with his healing side. They didn't speak at first. The silence between them was full. Not empty, Zara finally spoke. "You could leave," she said quietly. "Your people might come for you. Fix your ship. Take you back." Jack didn't answer right away. He looked at the stars, too, then said, "They might." She turned to him, sadness hiding in her eyes. "Will you go if they do?" He looked at her for a long moment, then shook his head. "I'm already home." She leaned against him, and together they sat until the stars faded, not as warrior and savior, not as rule breakers or legends, but just as two people who had chosen each other against the weight of a world that tried to decide for them. And in the quiet of that night, something new was born, not a tradition, not a bond from blood or battle, but love, pure and unshaped by anything but their own hearts. A strange wind swept through the village, different from the usual warm breeze. It carried dust from far lands, and with it a low hum in the sky. Zara heard it first. She stepped outside and stared at the horizon, her silver patterns glowing faintly in the dark. The stars above shifted, and something moved between them, metal. Smooth, silent, human. Jack followed her outside, his boots crunching softly on the dry soil. When he looked up, his heart dropped. A ship, Earth-made, was slowly descending through the clouds. It wasn't a warship, but it was armed, its lights scanning the ground, its engines humming like a living beast. It was the rescue signal he had once activated, long forgotten, now finally answered. The villagers gathered quickly, some curious, others fearful. Many remembered the stories of humans, of machines, of how things used to be before isolation. Zara stood still, her eyes never leaving the sky. "They've come for you," she whispered. Jack didn't answer. He just stared, emotions twisting inside him. Part of him wanted to feel relief, but it wasn't there. Not anymore. Not after everything. Not after her. The ship landed just beyond the village wall, its doors opening with a hiss. From it stepped a tall man in a clean uniform. Two others followed, each with scanners, rifles, and expressionless faces. "Jack Rayner," the first man called. "You're alive." Jack stepped forward slowly. "Yeah, I'm alive," he said. "Wasn't easy," the officer nodded. "Your mission was marked as failed. But the beacon activated again 3 days ago." He glanced at the crowd, then at Zara. "We assumed you'd be dead." "Or worse." "I'm not dead," Jack replied. "And I'm not leaving." That stopped the man cold. "Excuse me?" he asked. Jack looked back at Zara, her eyes wide, unmoving. Then he turned back to the officer. "I have someone here," he said. "I have a life now." The second soldier stepped forward. "This species is listed as tribal, not cleared for contact," he said sharply. "You're in violation of Code 27 if you've engaged in cultural interference." "I didn't interfere," Jack said. "Louder now. They saved me too." The third soldier scanned Zara silently, then whispered something to the officer. Something about DNA signatures, adaptability, and unique potential. The officer's expression changed subtly. "She's bonded to you?" he asked. Jack's jaw tightened. "Yes." "Then she comes with us," the man said. "For testing, classification, and containment." Zara stepped back, her fingers gripping Jack's arm tightly, her breath shallow, her fear returned, but this time, it wasn't for herself. It was for him. "No," Jack said firmly. "You're not touching her. You don't have a choice," the officer said. Reaching for a restraint device, "You're a soldier, not a king." But Jack wasn't a soldier anymore. He pulled Zara behind him and stepped forward, his voice calm but hard. "You want me? Fine, but you leave her out of this." One of the soldiers raised his rifle. Villagers screamed. Warriors stepped in, drawing blades and staffs. It was seconds away from chaos. But then Zara walked forward slowly, her head high, her eyes locked. On the officer, she said one word, soft but sharp like glass, a command in her own language. The villagers quieted. Jack turned in surprise. Zara reached into her pouch and pulled out something glowing, a shard of metal. Ancient and humming with strange power. The crowd gasped. The elder gasped. Even the human officer paused. "She carries the relic." One of the translators whispered. In awe, Zara held the artifact high, the light pulsing in time with her heartbeat. The ground trembled softly. Jack stared at her, not understanding how, but feeling the truth. Zara was not just a village girl, not just a daughter of hunters. She was something more, something older. The officer lowered his hand slowly. "What is that?" he asked, uncertain now. Jack smiled slightly. "That's the reason I'm not leaving." After a long pause, the officer finally nodded. "Your file will show you're missing in action." He said, "We were never here." The humans returned. To their ship, the engines roared, and within minutes, they disappeared into the stars, leaving only dust behind. That night, Zara and Jack stood under the twin moons again. Quiet, together, he looked at her with wonder. "You never told me," he said. Zara smiled softly. "You didn't ask." They laughed, tired but free, and sat beneath the stars as equals, not as savior and saved. Not as human and alien, but as something new, something rare. Something neither law nor history could name. Just love, pure and chosen.